Welcome everyone to the Trend Micro Monthly Threat Webinar Series. I'm your host, John Clay, cybersecurity expert for Trend Micro. And October this month is Halloween month, so I thought I'd do a little departure from my normal threat webinars and give you one around the scariest ransomware and highlighting the Halloween aspect of things. Now, before we start, some of the things, the criteria I gave for the ransomware that I picked today, some of it is based on the pictures that pop up in the screen. We know cyber criminals try to use the scariest pictures to entice the victim into paying, but others criteria might be around what the actual ransomware does to the system, how it's doing it, some of the different aspects of it. So we can get into all of that stuff. So let's move forward. But first, as I always do on these monthly threat webinars, I do want to highlight some of the current threat activity that we've seen over the course of the previous month. And these all come from our Simply Security blog, so you can find all of these if you go and search our Simply Security blog for these titles that will show up. The first one that I wanted to highlight is this cyber attack that India had recently. 3.2 million debit card account details were stolen. Again, we're seeing many cyber criminals going after financial data on a regular basis. This one obviously is a concern because of the amount of debit card account data that was stolen. So you can check out that story on Simply Security. The other one is Rick Ferguson, who's another one of our threat researchers here at Trend Micro. Wrote a blog about there isn't a cybersecurity skills gap. I think everybody has seen out there that and has concerns about the skill gap that we have. But Rick takes a different approach, and you can read about it. One of the approaches he talks about is really bringing people from within the organization and giving them the skills and educating them to become cyber security employees. So instead of trying to reach out externally. So that's a good one to take a look at if you're struggling with finding people. Another one, Russian hacker suspected in LinkedIn breach arrested. So again, good news for law enforcement and the community as a whole, because this hacker got arrested who was linked to the LinkedIn breach. So always good to see activity in law enforcement and bringing these culprits to justice. Obviously, the best way to get rid of crime is to get the people off the streets, and in this case, off the internet. Another one, hacker releases code behind record-breaking Krebs cyber attack. So this is very disturbing because the DDoS attacks that we have seen recently against Krebs and recently against Dyn utilized some of these tools that are now made available to the criminal underground. So anybody can utilize the code and create their own DDoS attacks. So we certainly are going to monitor this on a regular basis. Obviously, these attacks included the Internet of Things and utilizing devices out there and compromising them and having those devices launch those DDoS attacks. So very concerning to us, but you can get more information about that and how that worked in that article. And then last, I wanted to highlight TalkTalk got hit with a record fine, 400,000 pounds for their cyber attack. So again, organizations definitely need to look at adding protection or improving their protections on identifying targeted attacks because any breach disclosure now that occurs, in a lot of these cases, these breaches are costing organizations massive fines. And when we see GDPR, which is the new privacy happening in Europe, regulations that are going in Europe, the fines are even going to be heftier. So take a look at that, and hopefully that can help you. So let's now move forward with some more fun stuff, and sometimes fun, sometimes not, but depending on if you're a victim or not, hopefully not. And we'll talk about how you can protect yourself as an organization towards the end and block some of these ransomware attacks more effectively than maybe in the past. So the first one I wanted to highlight was Petya. So this ransomware is interesting. Obviously, it's got a pretty scary pop-up message that goes on the system. But one of the real reasons why I wanted to highlight is that they added an overwriting the master boot record here. So by overwriting the MBR, it really rendered that computer useless, and you couldn't get it back without paying the fine. And you can see here there's the fine. There's a nice little pop-up that comes up, and it has the countdown for when you have to pay the fine by or pay the ransom by. But again, this is a concerning one because they added that destructive aspect to their attack by not just encrypting files but also overwriting the master boot record so the system couldn't boot up, and it would just pop up this message on the screen and you would have to pay the ransom to be able to get rid of it. So that's certainly a challenge. The other thing about Petya was interesting is it used Dropbox to drop the malware on systems. So again, criminals abusing legitimate cloud services, in this case Dropbox, to propagate malware. We also see that use for command and control and other aspects. Even exfiltration of data is going to some of the public cloud services because it's easy for criminals to utilize, but it also is usually not blocked by organizations. Another one that the next one we wanted to highlight is Jigsaw. Certainly, Jigsaw has been a challenge. I think from this one, the pictures obviously are pretty bad. They're inspired by Saw, right? Billy greets the infected users with a warning, pay or else. So you can see here that they use a very graphic, scary graphic to entice that victim to pay their ransom. They pop up a number of different messages that within as the process goes along. You can see here, right, the little pop-up at the bottom, you are about to make a very bad decision. Are you sure about it? We also have seen the other aspect that I wanted to highlight here is that the criminals behind it are going to delete a file every hour permanently that they don't pay. So that's also kind of scary from the perspective of being, if you're the victim, that you realize that the criminals behind it are going to start deleting permanently some of the files that they have encrypted on your system. So they also added an interactive chat feature to this ransomware, so you can get in a chat message with the criminals behind it to help you through your payment process. So certainly that's another challenge that we see with this specific ransomware. The next one I wanted to highlight is CERBER. CERBER's been around for a while now. We're actually, I think, on version 4 or version 5 already, which again shows you that the criminals behind these are constantly updating their malware, adding new features into their malware, different items that occur. In this case, it's one of the most notorious ones that we've seen in 2016. It includes attacks on cloud platforms. It includes in Windows scripting. It also has individual machines that it attacks, discovers the encrypting the entire databases. They're certainly targeting businesses because they're encrypting databases. They also added a little audio note. So I wanted to play this for everybody. Hopefully you all can hear this in here, but hang on.
Attention, attention, attention. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files have been encrypted. Your documents, photos, databases, and other important files have been encrypted. Your documents.
So that's an example of the message the audio message that pops up. So again, the criminal's utilizing an audio message as opposed to just a visual message in their ransomware attacks. So that led me to want to include this in one of the scariest ransomware families that we've seen today. The next one is Chimera, and one of the reasons why I added this one is that one of the more challenging aspects that we've seen with ransomware developers over the course of the year, last 2 years, is this idea of a secondary infection or a secondary attack. And in the case of Chimera, they exfiltrate the data to be used as a secondary extortion request. So when besides getting this pop-up that gives you information about that your files are being encrypted and all that. They also give you a message that says if you don't pay your private data, which includes pictures and videos, they will be published on the internet. So they're going to steal a lot of the data as well and publish it on the internet. So again, they're trying to get you, if you don't pay the ransom for encrypting, they want you to pay the ransom for not allowing them to publish your data on the internet. So that's certainly another challenge that we have seen in one of the scarier ransomwares that we've seen. And this is showing up in a number of different ones, but Chimera is a good example. It was one of the first ones that also included an extortion, secondary extortion request. The next one is HDDCryptor, and I added this one because, again, this is a one that does more of a destructive type attack. It not only targets the resources in your network shares, such as drives, files, even printers and serial ports via server message block, but also locks the drive itself. So it's going to lock your hard disk drive on your system and make it inaccessible. So you can see here this message that pops up: you are hacked, your HDD encrypted, hard disk drive encrypted, contact us for decryption. And it gives you some info, that gives the victim some information about how to contact them. It's usually distributed via an executable downloaded from a malicious website. So again, this one, instead of using spam, which is the predominant way of infecting, they use malicious websites and downloading the executable there. It's pretty tricky in that from that perspective. So again, dropping several components to the system's root folder. But again, encrypting the hard disk itself is, again, one of those destructive items, so you don't have access to your drive anymore. So that certainly will affect you as an organization or as a victim if you're a consumer there. The next one I wanted to highlight is called Microp, and this is an interesting one because it taunts the victim by placing blame on the victim. So if you can read that, they make you think like that you actually had stolen information from a gang or some hackers, and that you need to pay them to and give back the data to them and pay them. And then the scary part about this is they're asking about $29,000 worth of payment. So it's a very high ransom payment. We usually see between 1 and 2 Bitcoins, but this one you can see here is a 42 or 48 plus Bitcoins they're asking for. But again, it's kind of interesting that they switch this around by placing the blame on the victim here, making you think that you have stolen something from someone you shouldn't have, and that you need to pay them to get it back. And you obviously have the scary picture of Anonymous there as well. Now the next one is another one that we saw just recently called Crysis. This ransomware family was found in Australia. We see it in New Zealand. So one of the aspects of this is that you can see here, obviously, the pop-up message is kind of interesting. It's got some military folks with the hats on and covering their faces and things like that. But the other aspect here that I wanted to highlight is that there's usually a person behind this attack. They attack RDP. Oops, sorry, I went too far back on that one. Go forward one more here. Yeah, so there is usually in a lot of cases that the ransomware attacks are being done with ransomware itself, with malware itself. This one actually has a person behind it, and they are using RDP, remote desktop protocol, brute force attacks to get onto systems, especially servers, and then that person can then leverage a brute force attack to get credential stealing. Once they get the credential stealing, it gives them the opportunity then to go do other nefarious things in that network. So you can see here the attacker at the top left uses RDP. He can go into a web server. He can go onto connected devices, go onto file servers, even get into the end user, and he can distribute ransomware at will, however he wants and wherever he wants from that perspective. So certainly a scary prospect here that instead of you having to defeat simply ransomware and malware in general, now you have to defeat an attacker, kind of like a targeted attacker who's inside your organization and browsing around and moving laterally inside your organization to find things and do things to your organization. So this one certainly, again, we only see this in Australia and New Zealand, but like a lot of the attacks we've seen around the world, we will likely see this one propagating to other regions of the world as well. This one I wanted to highlight is CryLocker, and this one's kind of interesting. The reason it's called CryLocker is it plays on victims' emotions. So what they do is they change the encrypted extension of files to .cry, and they encourage people to buy their happiness instead of crying over their fate. So you can see some of the wording here, right? Don't cry. Don't cry not. You can still get find happiness by paying us your ransom and paying us the ransom and to get your files back. So again, a little different tact by the criminals behind this, trying to play on people's emotions and buy their happiness instead of buying their sadness. It's to buy happiness is to pay the ransom is to buy your happiness around that. The next one I wanted to highlight is called Stampado. And again, this one, like we've seen in some of the other examples, I wanted to highlight that this one pops up and tells you that every 6 hours a random file is going to be permanently deleted. And after 96 hours, the decryption key is gone forever. So again, they're making it, and they've got the countdown there to make it look extremely authentic. But you as the victim obviously are given a very short time frame from which you need to pay your files, and you're losing files every 6 hours before you are willing to pay up. So that's another scary one that we've seen out there in the world. And then the last one I wanted to highlight is an interesting one. I just saw it last week come out, and this one is called ClickMeg, and it poses as a click the button joke game. So the criminals behind it are get the person to think they're getting a joke game, and the person clicks the button a number of times, and all it's doing in the background when you're clicking those buttons is basically proceeding to encrypt all the specific files. So it's encrypting your files while you're thinking you're playing a game. Obviously, there's some interesting graphics with this one. And obviously it's non-English, so this is affecting a different region of the world, but certainly I thought I'd highlight it. It's kind of scary. From some of those pictures to me are quite scary, and you can see the anonymous again, you have been hacked, and so forth. So again, a little bit scary, kind of picture-y one, but also kind of interesting that they're using a game option to lure people to play in a game, and then you click in the game and it's not doing anything other than encrypting your files in the background. So always interesting. So those are some of the more scarier ransomware. Obviously, one of the challenges that we have seen out there in the world is the number of ransomware. So you can look here and kind of highlight some of the things we've seen in the first half of this year. The FBI have seen a huge increase in the losses associated with ransomware. You can see here just in Q1, they saw about 209 million losses versus 229 million in all of 2015. So we also have seen 145 new families in 2016 alone compared to 29 for all of 2015, so a 5-time increase. So that's obviously apparent. You saw a lot of different ransomwares just a minute ago with my scariest ones, but there's obviously a number of them out there, 145. That's many being created on a weekly basis. We also, PhishMe put in a report at the end of March, 93% of all phishing emails contain crypto ransomware. So almost all of the phishing emails today are now containing ransomware, according to PhishMe. And Infoblox reported that ransomware domains were up by 3,500% in Q1. So again, and this goes to the infrastructure behind ransomware is growing tremendously. 3,500% of new ransomware domains being registered in Q1 alone. So the criminals behind these attacks are upping their game, adding new malware types, new families of ransomware, new domains as part of their infrastructure, and the use of ransomware in phishing emails is increasing spectacularly. We also have seen, if we look at our first half report, ransomware entry points, obviously, again, the top one is 71% being spam. So organizations, I know a lot of organizations have dealt with spam over the years, and they've got decent anti-spam technologies, but these spam campaigns that the criminals behind it are doing, they've been optimizing these spam campaigns on a regular basis. They're constantly tweaking their spam campaigns. We're seeing the emails at certain times of the day being targeted for businesses. So you'll see email coming in only in the very early mornings or late in the evenings for when employees are more likely to get a glut of emails and go into their email and process emails so that they'll miss the one or two that are in there that are phishing versus their legitimate ones. We also see, obviously, exploit kits and exploits going up. Malvertisements are big. Compromised sites, drive-by downloads are big for ransomware as well. You can see here typical spam subject lines that we've seen in a lot of the spam campaigns we've monitored, like documents requested, an audit report, budget reports, we could not deliver your parcel. So one of the things I would recommend organizations do, you can see from here that a lot of the employees who are being targeted are in finance and shipping and receiving. Those are two organizations inside your business that you should be educating those employees very heavily and frequently on phishing emails and how to identify phishing and spam emails, especially I think in your shipping and receiving. There tends to be some turnover in that area of your business. So within those employees, so regularly testing and training those folks is critical. Also, here's the list of exploit kits and ransomware. Pretty much every exploit kit today is serving up ransomware, and then you can see here multiple ransomware families. So organizations definitely need to step up their ability to patch. I wanted to highlight these are the July, August, and September ransomware families that we have seen come about. I wanted to highlight these last 3 months. But you can see here one thing, that the sheer numbers, so August was probably a record month for the number of ransomware families being introduced or version updates to ransomware occurring. A couple of highlights I wanted to do. Stampado, I mentioned Stampado earlier, but one of the things that I didn't mention is that this is a ransomware as a service, and the criminals behind it actually offer for $39, they offer a lifetime subscription to their service, and the ransom amount is customizable. So because it's a service, they also deliver a admin console with this, so the criminal behind it who is launching a campaign can monitor his campaigns. He can put in custom ransom amounts for each and every campaign, so he can change it up for his victims on a regular basis. So certainly we're seeing more and more of that. We recently published a ransomware as a service document on our website. You can find that under our security intelligence section of the website. That can give you some information about that. The other one I wanted to highlight is called Rex Linux, and the reason I wanted to highlight this is, one, this isn't always about Windows. In this case, it's a Linux-based ransomware going after Linux customers. But also, the secondary infection, besides encrypting your files, is they will launch a DDoS attack against the network if no payment is rendered. So again, a secondary way of trying to get you to pay by issuing a DDoS attack against you. You can see this one is only 0.5 to 1 Bitcoin, so small payment amount to get rid of it. And then Decryption, I wanted to highlight this one because the criminals behind it are spoofing Trend Micro file properties. So if you got this file and you looked at the file properties, you would think it was coming from Trend Micro. Obviously, we know that's not the case. And I just wanted to highlight this because in a lot of cases, the criminals will utilize and look to utilize security vendors and compromise and spoof the security vendors' names and so forth in their malware to make people think it's legitimate or not. So let's talk a little bit about solutions for ransomware and what you can do as an organization. Here's a number of things. These are kind of like best practices against ransomware. So first and foremost, backup and restore. We recommend an automated process here, 3 copies, 2 formats, and 1 air gap. The reason it's one air gap is because, as I mentioned earlier, and a lot of these ransomware families now are going after the backup files on the networks as well as the shared drives on the network. So if you're, let's say, for example, you're backing everything up to a cloud provider, in a lot of cases, these ransomwares will actually, if you have direct access to those cloud folders, it will go into those cloud folders and encrypt anything in there too. So you definitely want an air gap. Keeping current with patching, obviously, again, the criminals are utilizing exploits and exploit kits regularly now, malvertisements to drop ransomware. So keep current with patching. Utilize virtual patching. If you don't have it today, you can utilize virtual patching to minimize that window of opportunity from the time that you get the patch and you have it deployed. Because we know patch management is difficult. Virtual patching is an effective way to prevent exploits from running in your systems. Employee education. Obviously awareness, best practices, I mentioned that earlier, especially some specific groups inside your organization. Access control, again, limiting access to business critical data. These criminals are looking to encrypt the data that you need and you want to entice you to pay the ransom. So if there is critical data that you should be looking at encryption. Also access control to shared drives. I mentioned the ransomware will go after shared drives. If you can maybe put in some 2-factor authentication options, that could stop that ransomware from encrypting those. We do discourage paying of ransom. Obviously, this is a decision an organization has to make on their own and assess that. But if you have done number 1, which is backup and restore, you probably don't have to pay the ransom. And then improve security posture. Obviously, there are new technologies being introduced every day for anti-ransomware. I'm going to talk about a couple of them here in a moment. But we do recommend that organizations relook at their existing security products and identify if they can, if the vendor, work with the vendor to see if they have any new capabilities they've introduced recently. In a lot of cases, you can free upgrade to those newer solutions, but also in a lot of cases, vendors tend to disable those, and so you may have to, out of the gate, so you may have to talk to your vendor about which technologies you need to enable and what are your best practices, best settings that they should be putting forward. I did want to highlight that Trend Micro has been providing free decryption tools for ransomware on our website. So if you go to antivirus.com or you go onto our trendmicro.com, you can find our free tools and apps. And there is a free ransomware decryption tool. Now, understand, this is not for every ransomware out there. It is only for certain versions and certain variants of ransomware or families of ransomware. So you need to look at look inside the README file to identify if it's a ransomware family or a version of a ransomware family that you've been infected with, to see if that decryption tool will work. But this is a good first line of defense. If you have been a victim of ransomware, you might want to take a look at this decryption tool. I know there are some other security vendors who have decryption tools as well, and some of us overlap, some of us don't, so you may want to look at a number of places to see. Enterprise for protecting enterprises. So, Trend Micro offers a wide range of products at different layers. The first layer of defense today in ransomware, in our opinion, the best place is email and gateway protection. So looking at if you're just using anti-spam and you've been using anti-spam for a while now, you may want to relook at that because the spam campaigns are very effective. The phishing campaigns are very effective. So we have some new spear phishing protection, malware sandbox now. So if a attachment comes in, you can drop it into our sandbox and have it analyzed to see if it's a malicious attachment or not. Our IP and web reputation is the best in the industry, so we can block the threat at its source, whether it's the email source or the web source, malvertisements, exploit kits, etc. We can protect against. Our endpoint protection with Office Scan is top of the line. You've seen Gartner has us at the best in the industry. Forrester Wave just came out, gave us the best endpoint security. So take a look at Office Scan. We just introduced last week some new machine learning capabilities into our Office Scan endpoint product. But you can see here we also have some specific ransomware behavior monitoring that we've added over the last several months. App control, vulnerability shielding, our web security, so you can block downloads from websites. On the network protection side, our Deep Discovery Inspector product, this is where you can inspect the network traffic. You can have it has sandbox capability to sandbox any malicious file or suspicious files. It also can help you with lateral movement protection and command and control. And then the server side, because we're seeing more and more server-based ransomware, our Deep Security product, which has vulnerability protection, vulnerability shielding, web server protection, lateral movement protection. We have rules in place so that if ransomware is trying to infect a shared drive that's on that server, we can identify that through some of the rules we have in place, our IPS rules that are in that product as well. So multiple layers, and again, we recommend multiple layers of protection to defeat ransomware. We do recommend, again, the best place is likely the gateway. Also, for our small and medium businesses, our worry-free product has many different ransomware behavior and IP reputation, web reputation, and our home user products as well. Now, how successful are we? I wanted to highlight just, our effectiveness. So from March to August of 2016, we were analyzing all of the ransomware attacks against our customer base. You can see here 368 million of ransomware attacks were blocked at the email gateway, 29.6 million at the web gateway URL blocking. In the file, it's very small. 99% are blocked at that gateway level. So again, that's where we feel most ransomware can be stopped. But if it does get through there, we do have the different file scanning technologies and machine learning now technologies at the endpoint to protect against this as well. But again, that's where the last line of defense should be. First line should be at the gateway or network layer. We also have a number of resources for you to educate you on ransomware. So, you can go to our Say No to Ransomware campaign pages on our website. We also have a blog on a regular basis. We have a definition page that is regularly updated in the security intelligence section of our site that will give you information about what's going on in ransomware. And then if you want to keep up on the regular day-to-day activities, I would recommend going and subscribing to our security intelligence blog. You can get a feed from that, or our Simply Security blog, or our security news section of our site, where all of those areas we have information about ransomware on a regular basis. So with that, I wanted to close up. Again, if you're not familiar with Trend Micro, we've been around for many, many years, since 1988. We're about a $1.2 billion business. We have 500,000 businesses, millions of consumers, which helps with our understanding of the threat landscape. We have 450 plus researchers on staff regularly looking at ransomware campaigns and other threats, vulnerability research. that regularly helps us understand the threat landscape and help build new technologies just like this recent machine learning capability we added to our endpoint and some of the other capabilities we've been adding throughout our product lines. So take a look at us and we'd be happy to help with you. And if you need information, you want information, you can contact us. You can contact sales. You can call us, 888-762-8736, or shoot an email, sales@trendmicro.com. But I also, finally, I wanted to ask you to put feedback in. So if you like this, give me 5 stars or 4 stars. But and also there's a comment option. So if you have areas that you'd like me to cover in future threat webinar series, I'd love to hear from you, my audience. And with that, I want to close it up, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.